Professor of Sociology at University of Colombo, South Asian University, former, he insists, but he's also a writer, he's a poet, he's a translator. Sasanka, now, translations, academic and creative texts, there are issues of access and there are certain limitations. Could you kind of elaborate on that for a little bit?
Thank you, Malinda. This whole business of owning your language is becoming very complicated. And I had told my colleagues, how do you do this, some time ago when this was mooted. And I was pretty sure what is happening now would happen. Because, see, and I will start from there, because this is also about kind of politics of language. What Ahilan was saying, I didn't understand any of it, right? Now, I came today to talk in Sinhala, which is my language, and if I speak in my kind of Sinhala, he will also not understand any of it. So, this is part of the problem in this country, given the nature of language politics, right? Now, see, obviously then we have to go to the colonial language. And thank God the British colonized us when they did, because otherwise even this wouldn't be here. So, what I want to talk about today in this short time is translation as a tool and as a kind of politics. Because, see, we had a war that went on for, 30 years, right? And my sense is that we still do not have a proper understanding of what happened in those areas. And people like Ahilan from Jaffna and the Northeast in general also don't have an idea of what was going on in the South, not just in terms of the war, but also in terms of experiences of anxiety and so on and so forth, because more than scholarly material, it is in our poetry and fiction that these are best captured. And that is in Sinhala, right? So the problem for me, or the challenge, is that if we, these words like reconciliation makes me very uncomfortable. When it is used by embassies, the Sri Lankan government, NGOs and so on and so forth, because they become just projects. What I would like to see is that kind of thing happening through language. Right? And that cannot happen as a matter of projects. It can only happen through things like fiction, things like poetry. Now, I have read Ahilan's poetry only because it was available in English, right? So I get a sense of what was going on in these places. And when I write my sociology, I had used, when I was writing my sociology on the politics of violence in this country, I had actually used Rudramurti Cheran's poetry for, even though I'm a sociologist, I'm not supposed to deal with these non-objective things like poetry. But then I thought some of his works, as you know, explains and captures the nuances of those times in the middle of the war. So rather than writing some academic text in a tiresome language, I found it easier to get Cheran and put him in the middle of my text as a fairly nuanced point of departure. So, what I'm trying to say is that translations, if you see like this, then they are just more than it's more than a technical process. It is more than just translating a bunch of words from one language to another. It is about bringing an entire cultural world into another cultural world where that experience is not known, right? Even the English poetry and fiction in Sri Lanka is a small community, but that is also not known in these two languages, by and large, right? So, of course, I am completely untrained when it comes to translation, but I've translated quite a lot. I saw very happily some of those things in that bookstore out there. But most of us in this country are untrained translators. All of us have done this. And if we waited for training, nothing would have been translated, right? So that is the bottom line. So now let me look at my notes, because as I was saying, I wrote everything in Sinhala. Now I have to translate my notes into English and then my thoughts into English. And my first language is not English. See, the other thing is, and tell me if I'm taking too much. See, there are two kinds of translation that I think must happen in our country if we are to come to terms with what is happening globally as well as what is happening in the worlds that have to do with us. So we have these fairly well-known scholars produced by this country like Kanana Tobesekar or S.J. Thambaya and these kinds of people who have written not mostly exclusively in English. No, but they write about us. And I think it's utterly criminal if our people cannot read what they write, because it is about us, right? But at the same time, we have this petty politics in this country where the moment these overseas-based scholars write something on Buddhism or whatever, everybody gets very upset without reading the text. And this has happened before. When S.J. Thambaya's book Buddhism Betrayed was published somewhere in the US, it was banned in this country, right? And I was one of those people who wrote in public against the ban, even though I thought the book was a bad book. See, you can't go on banning books, right? Now, the more informed conversation would have come if that book was in Sinhala. Up to now, it is not, right? And if you look at Obesekara's text like on the Patini cult, not in Sinhala and not in Tamil, but it is in Japanese. I mean, not Patini cult, but Medusa Sea is in Japanese, but it's not in Sinhala, not in Tamil, right? So, want me to go on or shall I say?
Oh wait, no, one thing, what you say, I think we'll all agree about this business of not getting translated. There people talk about us in another language and we don't get to read it. But to be, Gananath's essay on Dutugamunu's conscience was actually translated by Dayasisara, and there was a very good review of that, comprehensive critique of that by Shankar Malseri. But that is the exception, that is the issue. But the idea about, you kind of touched upon it, it's not only about things getting translated, but getting translated right. Could you elaborate on that?
That is a critical thing, because it is a very serious thing. Because nowadays, if you go to our bookstores, you will see that there are a lot of translations from Murakami to, I mean, everybody who's won awards around the world. But we know for a fact that the translation skills in this country is not supposed to be that great, because it's a problem of our education system. But then how do you have these translations? Some people would say that, I mean, I've heard this many times, that you don't have to have that many skills in the language from which you translate, as opposed to you need to have skills in the language to which you translate. I completely disagree. I think you have to have the same skills in both languages. Now, when I was translating the books that I've translated, and I couldn't, they were from Japanese, Swedish and Persian sources. Now, obviously, I don't speak any of those languages, right? Certainly not 13th century Persian. So then, when I translate into Sinhala, then it has to come from some other language that I've forgotten my German, so it has to come from English, right? So what I'm trying to say is, now at least my skills in English and Sinhala are 100%. There's no confusion about that. But you go to the bookstores, you will see these translations which are, we don't know where they come from. And recently I actually checked. I went to a bookshop, bought some books, and went home and put some of the sections on Google, and I was right. They have been, some of these people have used Google Translation, and you know what happens when that happens. Some small things, very, very uncreative academic texts like the ones that I generally write, those things you can use Google translations and get away with it. But fiction, for God's sake, and poetry, you lose the spirit, you lose the sensibility, you just lose everything. But that is already happening, and this is before ChatGPT kind of thing, right? So what, to me, the worrisome thing is that now when we translate, we don't do it all the time, but we will probably be cautious about it, because this is not a bread and butter issue for us. It is a political, right? It is a matter of consciousness. We think that some of these materials should be in our language, so it's a political decision. But that is not the case for many people. It is a bread and butter issue, so the more you translate, the more, it's a livelihood thing, no? So the quality doesn't matter. I'll say one more thing and then, right? So far we've talked only about global knowledge coming to our languages through English or through our languages, right? But what about the other way around? By now, we are producing fairly decent fiction and poetry in our languages. Now, shouldn't they go to the world? Do we always have to wait for Oram Pamuk or somebody else, Garcia Marquez or somebody, to be translated from Spanish or Turkish or whatever to English and then to Sinhala? Why shouldn't those people read ours? It might be as good, but then who's going to do it? The same problem that I referred to earlier comes again, and one more problem is that we do not have a translation policy in this country. Whereas in Japan and China, there was an early decision that any key text that came out in English or German or French, they will put to their language. That is why Obesekara's Medusa Seai is in Japanese. Right? We don't have.
About 25 years ago, I remember Dr. Amarkeet, when he was a doctoral student, wrote an article, I think it was in the Rave or the Divaya, and he said that we have so many English departments, and he hasn't seen anyone in those, either students or professors, translating anything from Sinhala or Tamil into English, which speaks what Dr. Sasan. Now it's better.
Situation is now a little better, I think. Now we have some translators coming out of English departments who are bilingual, who read Sinhala literature closely. When I made that comment but 20 years ago, it was not much actually.
That is possibly because at that time, and especially even before that, those who came to English departments came from English-speaking households where Sinhala and Tamil were not spoken. Now there's some change happening. But Dr. Sasanka was talking about using some, who was the poet who said, with a nuanced reading of an experience in the North and East. You said you used some poet, Cheran, right? So I would, since you all have not spoken much, I would put to both of you, I was talking to Dr. Ahilan about the possibility of having an anthology of short stories also maybe, in Tamil, translated into Sinhala, since both of you are professors, and since you translate and since you are in literature, what is the potential? We can stop with that and we can go to question and answer. What do you think the possibility of that? What are the obstacles?
So actually, translation is an act. Actually, it's a kind of activism. Translation for me. So what Sasanga mentioned about translation is true. As a poet writing in Tamil, in that time I have two desires: translated into English to reach the second generation diaspora, to say about my experience or my pains living in Sri Lanka, being a Tamil. So that is first. And the second thing, want to share my things, connect with the Sinhalese speaking people. So because the thematics or the pain from the living experience in the land, I want to share my second generation of the people from Sri Lanka now who is living abroad in whatever language we are speaking. And also I want to share the people, the rest of the Northeast, to what actually I experienced, what would I share with them. So translation is must. I don't know what happened in Sinhala, but thank the authors or editors in Tamil, most of the, at least poetry, translated into Tamil. So Bimal Kisanaiko, whoever, so many things in the little magazines of Sri Lankan Tamil zone, they translated. So because of that, I have a little sense of what actually happened. So translation is a tool and act to do something.
Right. Amare,
Well, look.
you have 1 minute.
Yeah, I know. There's quite a bit, it's been translated from Tamil to Sinhala. So much so that in 2011, in my department, University of Peradeniya, introduced this course called Tamil Literature in Sinhala Translation. So we have more than enough materials for modern literature, novels, poems, short stories, to be used in, as required text in that course. Interestingly enough, that course became very popular among Sinhala students. They read only in Sinhala. They don't read English or Tamil. So we were really happy that, at least we could use, as Sasanka mentioned earlier, this literature to get at some elements of Tamil speakers' life in Sri Lanka.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Amar Kirti. I hereby appoint the two of you as curators of this activist project of translating back and forth. Before we think about the outside world, let's at least get to know each other's experience in a nuanced kind of way. So both of you will be editing translations of short story collections and poetry collections very shortly, and HSBC is sponsoring. So we have 8 minutes for question and answer. Ask one question, keep it short, take 15 seconds, no more, otherwise, and direct it to, preferably to a particular panelist.
I have two quick questions. One is, could you make some comment about the national anthem in terms of translation, in terms of acceptance, right? Our national anthem. And secondly, just out there in the real world of the government ministries where we don't see translations of instructions. It's either in Sinhala only, in the south, or in Tamil only. I just like to, this is an everyday occurrence of our life, not just from the art's point of view. Maybe I don't know the names of the people, the gentlemen here, but anybody can answer it. I'd like to hear your point of view on those two questions, please.
I remember writing, there was a huge hue and cry about the national anthem should be in Sinhala only or something like that, this Tamil version. I remember writing an article saying the Tamil national anthem is beautiful, but Sasanka, why don't you respond?
See, I didn't hear the question well. If you're asking about the Tamil version of the national anthem, whether it should be sung, is that what you're asking?
Yes, I'm asking about the acceptance of translations. One thing to translate, quite another how the public reacts to it. I'd like, and the national anthem is just an example.
Okay. No,
And the other one was about the instructions just in offices, or even on a box of a label.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
These are everyday things, not necessarily artistic.
No, the first one is interesting because I had that experience. I lived in New Delhi for, 13, 14 years. So every time, one of those occasions in the Sri Lankan embassy, it's called the High Commission or something like that. One of the High Commissioners actually had the Tamil version of the national anthem, and I thought this was very good. I have checked the translation, it was a long time ago. it is used in government circles. Depending on, it's not a policy as such, but depending on who's in charge of something. But the issue was with the people who were there at that, this was a National Day celebration. And then that is where your question of acceptance come into play. Even if there is a policy, a lot of the people who were listening said, this should not be sung, this is not our national anthem. So while, having that standing at attention and so on and so forth, I was one of the few people who said, see, this is part of the deal, this is right. But I know I was a minority at that time. Now, the issue with instructions, that is supposed to be part of our policy. It is supposed to be trilingual. But I don't know to what extent that is being practiced, because as a Sinhala speaker, I go to a government office, I don't even think, that is our problem, whether it is in Tamil or not, because I understand Sinhala. I will only feel it if I do this in his city, if it happens, right? So I am not sure whether that consciousness is fully with us, even after the war. I just can't give a definitive answer, but I have my doubts.
Dr. Hyder?
Yeah, recently I have written a letter to one of the ministry. It's an important one I don't want to mention. So reply from the language they used, Sinhala. So I took that letter and find the person and asked what is this, what they mentioned, these things happen. So these are very hurting. And also you are talking about these signature boards. Most of the places the Tamil are written wrong. Even the buses also sometimes can be spelled out in a different way, become a bad word also happening. So these are the things happening. So need to do something. It's not fair.
Essentially what Shashank was saying is that the policy is there but it's not being implemented. Partly it is resources, partly the lack of will. Things are probably better than they used to be, but I think we are far away from where we ought to be. Right, Dr. Hyder? We probably have time for one question more. Just one question. Is there anyone who needs to ask?
Thank you, Malinda, Sasanka, everybody. Sorry, I'm going to limit my question to a Sinhala language one. Is the Sinhala language and its literature an exportable commodity? I'll elaborate a little bit. When I was growing up, I read a lot of Russian literature in translation, to the point where I thought that Chekhov was a Sinhala writer. I think among our politicians also, they think communism might be a Sinhala idea. So the only translation doesn't have to be English, but the ideas of a language have to be marketable. In your opinion, anybody's, is the Sinhala language and literature marketable? I love Professor Amrakirti's literature in Sinhala. I haven't really read it in English.
We can
Is it
get
marketable?
Amrakirti.
He can answer himself. Will it be marketable in English or any other language? Spanish, French, any of the world languages.
Okay, can I answer that? Whether anything can be marketed, whether it's a bottle of water or lipstick or whatever, you can do so much with advertising, but it's the quality of the product that will eventually make it sell. If you have good literature, then the potential is there. But if you have equally good translation, then that potential can be realized. Now what we are talking about is that we are having that problem about our product. We should have some mechanism to make sure that those who translate it in English or French or Spanish or whatever, it doesn't have to be English. Best probably would be Chinese, I think, right now. I think there is that technical difficulty, we lack the expertise, we don't have the human resources, quality human resources to do that. I think if someone can ask a question in 5 seconds, one of you can answer in 10 seconds and we'll be done. I'll take one more question and we'll we stretch the limit. Time's up. Sorry. I hope you all enjoyed this and it was useful, and I hope that these conversations that are generated can continue. Thank you, Dr. Sasanka Pera. Thank you, Dr. Ahilan. He came all the way from Jaffna. Amare came all the way from Kandy. Sasanka and I came all the way from Colombo. Thank you very much. Give them a round of applause.
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, let's give another round of applause for Mr. Leonage Amarkiti P. Ahlan Sasan, along with Sasanka Pereira, doing a beautiful job right here at the Salon. This is, of course, the Literary Festival right here in 2025, the second edition. Once again, small reminders going out to all of you as well. If you